It was a normal morning at the city's most luxurious bank branch, until a 71-year-old farmer walked through the door, torn straw hat, faded shirt, dirty boots. Harold Mitchell seemed completely out of place in that impeccable environment. When he asked to transfer $18 million, the branch stopped, and the cruel laugh of the manager echoed through the hall. "If you have the balance, I'll pay you double." But Marcus didn't know who he was messing with, and nobody expected what would come next. Harold Mitchell pushed the glass door of the bank branch with his hands calloused from farm work. The freezing air conditioning contrasted with the heat still stuck to his simple clothes. At 71 years old, he had woken early that Thursday morning as he always did for the last 53 years, drank his black coffee, looked at the cows, and decided it was time to resolve that banking matter personally. The dirty straw hat covered his gray hair. The faded plaid shirt showed years of honest use, and the dusty boots still carried traces of red earth from his farm. On his wrist, a simple plastic watch, the same one he'd worn for 22 years. Nothing about him screamed wealth, nothing suggested power. It was exactly how he liked to be seen, an ordinary man. The other customers, all in impeccable executive attire, instinctively moved away when Harold passed. Women in high heels whispered behind designer purses. Men in suits adjusted their ties uncomfortably. The contrast was striking. There was a world of appearances, of status, of judgments based on what one wore. Marcus Williams, the branch manager, observed the entire scene from his office with bulletproof glass walls. At 37 years old, Marcus considered himself a winner. Graduated in business from the best private university, MBA, abroad, imported car and apartment in the best neighborhood. His Italian suit cost more than 3 months of minimum wage. His English shoes shone like mirrors. Another one who got lost, thought Marcus, adjusting his imported silk tie, probably doesn't even know where he is. He had built his career being ruthless with small people. For Marcus, success was measured by bank account, by address, by watch brand, and that old man clearly had none of that. The receptionist, Emma, a 25-year-old who admired Marcus, also noticed the discordant presence. "What a shame," she murmured to her colleague. "How did they let this man in here?" She had been trained by Marcus to filter the right type of client. People like Harold, in her view, only brought problems. When Harold approached the service counter, the environment became tense. His boots made a different noise on the marble floor. Some clients stopped their conversations. Marcus left his office walking with firm steps and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" The question came out with a condescending tone, as if talking to a lost child. Harold took off his hat, revealing a face marked by sun and years, but with firm, intelligent eyes. "Good morning, young man. I need to make a transfer from my account." Marcus could barely disguise a laugh. He looked at Emma, who covered her mouth to hide a malicious smile. "Of course, sir." He paused, waiting for the name. Harold Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell." Marcus continued pronouncing the name as if it were an inside joke. "How much do you intend to transfer?" $18 million. It's for an investment at the brokerage, needs to leave today before 3 in the afternoon. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus blinked several times as if he hadn't understood. Emma choked on her own saliva. The other clients, who until then pretended not to be paying attention, now stared blatantly. Marcus recovered his composure and let out a loud laugh. "If you have the balance, I'll pay you double." His sarcastic laugh echoed through the entire branch. $18 million. Imagine that, Emma. Our farmer friend here wants to transfer $18 million. Emma laughed along, infected by her boss's joke. Other employees approached, curious with the commotion. The situation was getting embarrassing, but Marcus was having fun. For him, humiliating inferior people was almost a sport. "Are you sure you didn't confuse the numbers?" Marcus asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe it's $18 or $180. Harold remained calm, accustomed to this type of situation. Throughout life he had learned that appearances deceived both his and others. He knew exactly where he was, knew exactly who he was, and knew that justice always came to those who had patience. "No, young man," he responded calmly. "It's $18 million. You can check the account." Nobody imagined that that simple man in humble clothes and quiet manner was the main shareholder of the bank. To understand who Harold Mitchell really was, you need to go back 53 years, when a 12-year-old boy walked barefoot through fields of a farm that didn't belong to his family. Born into a family of rural workers, Harold knew poverty up close, but not the bitterness it usually brings. His father, James Mitchell, worked from sunrise to sunset on land that wasn't his. His mother, Mrs. Rose, sewed for others until late hours to supplement family income. Young Harold already helped in the fields from an early age, but there was something that differentiated him from other boys, an insatiable thirst to learn that seemed endless. While friends played after work, Harold studied by lantern light, read everything he could find. His teacher, Mrs. Sarah Johnson, a 63-year-old lady who had dedicated her life to education, was the first to notice his exceptional potential. "This boy will go far," she said with pride that shone in tired eyes. "He has an intelligence that can't be taught, it's God's gift." At 17 years old, when many classmates had already abandoned studies to work full-time, Harold made a decision that would change his life. He hitched a ride to the big city 95 miles away and looked for work as a construction worker, slept in a tiny room that he shared with 3 other workers, woke up at 5 in the morning, worked until 5 in the afternoon, and still found energy to study at night. At 20 years old, graduated from high school with the best grades. Harold made a solemn promise to himself. He would leave poverty, but never forget where he came from, never lose the humility he saw as his greatest wealth. With his first salary as a qualified construction worker, he did something his colleagues considered crazy: bought his first stock of ExxonMobil. It was only 12 shares that cost almost all the money he had saved in months, but he had heard a businessman saying, "That's how the rich got richer." The next 2 decades were of sacrifice that few men would endure. Harold worked as a construction worker during the day and studied accounting at night, often arriving home at 11 at night, only to open books and study until 1 in the morning. Every penny saved became investment. Every dollar saved was a seed planted for the future. While colleagues spent on drink, gambling, and fun, he reinvested absolutely everything. At 27 years old, he met Mary Jane, an elementary school teacher with a generous heart who saw in him not the simple man he was, but the extraordinary man he could become. She supported him unconditionally, even when they spent months eating only rice, beans, and eggs, even when he came home exhausted and still sat to study. "One day this will be worth it," Harold said to her on the most difficult nights, holding her calloused hands. "It's not just for us, it's to show that simple people like us, can also win in this life." The first big investment came at 38 years old. Harold had saved penny by penny enough money to buy a small farm being auctioned for debts. It was a 320-acre lot apparently worthless, with degraded pastures and a house that looked more like ruins. Other interested parties laughed when they saw the little construction worker making bids, but Harold saw something others couldn't see: infinite potential for cattle raising and agriculture. In the next 6 years, working 18 hours a day, he transformed that arid, abandoned land into one of the region's most productive and respected farms. Introduced modern techniques, invested in genetic improvement of the herd, diversified crops. Neighbors who previously mocked now asked for advice. With substantial profits from the farm, Harold began diversifying his investments with the same patience and wisdom, bought stocks of companies he really believed in, invested in real estate when everyone thought the market was in crisis, applied in bonds when rates were high, had a natural instinct for business that no university could teach. At 48 years old, Harold was already a millionaire many times over, but absolutely nobody knew. Continued living in the same simple farmhouse, driving the same old Ford pickup, wearing the same humble clothes as always. Money doesn't change who you are inside. He always said to Mary Jane, "If you were good being poor, you'll be good being rich. If you were bad being poor, money will only show that more clearly." It was around this time he heard about a small banking institution going through difficulties. The owners wanted to sell, but nobody believed in the company's potential. Harold saw an opportunity, bought 35% of shares for a price everyone considered too high. In the following years, proved he was right. With management focused on serving small rural producers and micro-entrepreneurs, people like he had been, the bank grew exponentially. Harold never took executive positions, preferred to stay behind the scenes, but his decisions as main shareholder transformed a small regional institution into one of the largest banks in the interior.